In today's video, we're going to be turning this pile of lumber into these growth charts. I made all of these growth charts from rough-sawn lumber that I got from a local lumberyard, with the exception of the first one that you can see here, which was made from a piece of reclaimed oak. So cutting it down to length and then ripping it down into 3 roughly half-inch pieces on the bandsaw. After I finished resawing the board down, I ran each of the boards through the bandsaw again to clean up the edge to have a nice flat surface to glue the boards together with. Doing glue-ups always tends to be a bit messy.
One of the things I like to do is lay out some craft paper, something I got really inexpensively from just a craft store, on the workbench, using just a standard wood glue, Titebond 2, and applying that over all the edges, and then using clamps to secure the boards together. One of the things you want to be careful of is making sure you have even clamping force, so clamping on both sides of the board so you don't get any bowing. So as you can see here, putting clamps on both the top and the bottom sides, and then just making sure everything's flush as I'm tightening the clamps down. After letting the glue stand for about a half hour to an hour, I came back and just scraped off the glue that had set, allowed everything to dry overnight, and then came back and removed the clamps. Once everything was off, ran it through the planer a couple times just to get a nice even surface. Didn't run it through too many, wanted to make sure I could maintain a little bit of that rough look so you could tell that it was reclaimed wood. So several passes through the planer, and then we're good to go. Here you can see the before and after of that reclaimed wood. Now it's time to plane the rest of the boards. So the remainder of the boards are just rough-sawn lumber that I purchased from a local lumber yard. The board in the center is butternut, the upper left is maple, and the bottom right is oak. As you can kind of see when I hold up this board in the center, the butternut being so soft and having grain running in multiple directions, the planer kind of tore up the grain a little bit as I was going through, so it took quite a bit of sanding afterward. When I was selecting the wood, I was really careful to make sure I had really straight and flat boards, since I don't have a jointer to really flatten out the boards. So right here I'm essentially just smoothing out the surface.
After the boards were planed, I cut them down to length on the miter saw, cutting one small strip off of the first end just to have a square edge, and then cutting them to 6 feet in length.
When these are mounted on the wall, they'll be 6 inches up off the floor, and so that'll give a total measuring capability of 6.5 feet. After the boards were cut to length, I brought them over to the table saw.
General table saw tip, make sure the gullet of the blade is above the height of the wood. That'll help make sure all the sawdust is being removed and you'll get a cleaner cut. I ran both sides of the board over the table saw just to remove the rough edge. Tried to keep as much of the width of the boards as I could. I do not have an outfeed table, so as you can kind of see in a couple of these clips, I had a roller stand that was a huge help running these long boards through the table saw. So the next step is to cut the ruler of the growth chart.
So this is just a 1/8 inch straight bit, and then using a half or a 1/4" collar on the router. The template I'm using here is a piece of 1/4" plexiglass that I bought from a local hardware store, and then had a friend cut on his water jet to the template design. I'll have this design up on my website for free download if anybody would like to download it. Otherwise, you can make this a variety of other ways too, or even just use a straight edge. It just takes a lot longer. Having a template where you can move down and make each line successively is a lot quicker. I set the depth of these cuts to roughly 1/4", anywhere between 1/4" and 1/8 of an inch or so. One of the things that I did on a lot of these after I painted in the lines, which you'll see coming up, is ran them through the planer. So you will take a little bit of that top surface off once you run it through the planer. You want to make sure you have enough depth to cover that. With all the lines made, the next step was to actually put on the numbers. So changed out the bit to a sign bit. These are just some standard templates I got from Rockler. I put a couple extra pieces on either side just to help stabilize the number. I've noticed that if you just try to use one alone, it tends to sway a little bit and you don't get even marking with the router. The router bit I used here was just a sign making bit. It's a flat bottom with a slight round over. You could use any type of bit you wanted. I've also just used that 1/8" straight bit before to have a thin letter if you don't want the thick numbers on these. So totally up to you on what your preference would be. These kits are roughly, I think, around $35, $40. A little bit less if you get them on sale from Rockler, and there's a variety of other places online that sell them. Biggest thing, I think, is to have a plunge router. Trying to do this blind is very difficult. It's a lot easier to do it with a plunge router, and then just take your time. Don't press too hard on the plastic because it can sway. Took a lot of tape to make sure all these templates were well secured. Again, just taking your time, making sure it's in place so it's not going to slip or slide. After all this work put into the grill chart at this point, you don't want it to shift on you as you're making one of these numbers and then have to start over.
If your router has the ability to attach a vacuum or some type of dust collection, I would highly recommend this. The sawdust tends to gather in the grooves as you're cutting, makes it hard to move the router bit around as well as see where you're moving the router bit, so helps significantly to get a nice clean cut on the wood if you do have that dust collection capability.
One of the things I like to do when I'm making these growth charts to really have the tick marks and the numbers stand out is to paint in all of the grooves and channels. So the fastest way I've found to do this is just simply to use spray paint. Really make sure you spray from all different angles, make sure all the dust is cleared out, and then run them through the planer. Just take that top surface of paint off. The first one I tried, I actually taped over the whole surface and painted, thinking that would save me some time with just sanding it quickly and not having to run through the planer, but too much paint actually just snuck under the edges where the router had pulled up the tape, so didn't really end up saving that much time. As you can see here, as the piece runs through, cleans up that surface really nicely, gives you a really clean edge of the paint, and then come back and basically just sanded the edges to get rid of any excess paint there. Two of the growth charts I ended up actually just leaving the black on the edge and made sure that it was well covered, and I kind of like that look as well. So obviously whatever preference you have. Alternately, if you're going to be staining these, you could just allow extra stain to seep down into those tick marks and the letter and the numbers to help emphasize those and make them pop. Obviously it's up to your preference. My personal preference is the paint, because I think it just really adds a lot of contrast. I also broke the edges with the sander, just kind of soften them up a little bit, slight round over. Especially where those tick marks are, those corners are prone to chipping, so breaking that edge a little bit just helps prevent that. If it were to be hit on the edge for some reason, it's less likely to chip if that edge is slightly rounded over, or even just a chamfer. On the reclaimed wood, I did end up staining that one and then coming back and painting afterwards. So here you can just kind of see the stain as I apply that to the board. The other boards I kept natural and only put a coat of polyurethane on. So I made sure to wipe down any excess stain and had that already removed. Let that dry overnight and then came back and used just a can of Minwax polyurethane. One of the benefits of this specific type of finish is that you don't have to wait long between coats and you can essentially get as many on as you need within a short period of time. So as I mentioned before, painting by hand can be very tedious. It takes significantly more time than just spray painting. But on this board, it was so thin I didn't want to need to plane down any further, so I decided painting by hand was the best option.
I applied polyurethane to this board before painting, so as you can see me wipe here, it's really easy to remove any paint that you get on the edge, and it's not going to soak into the grain since that polyurethane has already sealed the grain of the wood.
Finish off the other boards, I used my HPLV sprayer and a water-based polyurethane. It's a general finish. I love this finish. It dries very quickly, much more friendly to the environment and to your nose. Doesn't stink up the whole house. It's really easy to apply. So I did several coats of that on all the different boards.
The last step of the project was then to put the mounting holes on the back side of the grill charts. So I marked off the locations on the bottom and top, roughly 6 inches from the bottom, 6 inches from the top, and then an inch long, and use those as guides for keyholes that I cut with my router. I'll have a link to this bit as well if you're interested in getting one. It's pretty useful for any type of sign making, frames, things like that that you want to just have a keyhole shape built right into the piece itself. So essentially I just plunged the bit down at the bottom mark, ran it up to the top, brought it back, and then turned the router off and removed it from the board, and it leaves a nice keyhole. Alright, well, thank you for watching my overview of how I made my growth charts. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments below and I will answer those as best I can. This is my first official YouTube video, so I would also greatly appreciate any comments you could leave with feedback for how I could improve my channel or other things you may like to see. You can also check out more information on my website, cravecraftonline.com. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, as I'll be adding more videos hopefully in the near future.